Bum, ba-dum, bum, ba-dum, bum. Ah, there we are. Oh boy, I can already tell my voice is not going to last long. Which is a shame, because I got about 4 hours of videos to record after this. Well, we'll see. I'll record them all with a sultry smoker's voice. Anyway, we are goofing off in Unreal, and I'm going to tell the world about it. So, streaming some... Oh, did I forget to... Hold on a second. I got to make sure that I have the right... Yeah. I have several OBS scenes set up since I do recording as well as streaming. Just making sure I have the right one active, and it seems to be. Streaming Unreal stuff. Just puttering around with the basics. So if you're wondering where... Ooh, that's not the right link. Just paste that in. There we go. If you're wondering where the project went, it's still there, but I don't know how to create third-party characters yet. Third-person characters. I only played around a little bit with Unreal, and it was a long time ago, and I've forgotten everything. So what we're doing now is we're going to create a first-person character in some disposable project, and then we are going to just going to go ahead and extend that, figure out how it should be for a third-person character. Right now we're using the default setup, which is a first-person character that apparently flies. Okay, so this is like a flying character. And obviously it's not how we're going to keep it. We're going to go ahead and change it around some. Notice this strange halo. I don't really know precisely what that is. Presumably that's like the light range or something. I didn't build this scene, so I can't tell you exactly why it is set up the way it is. But all we really need is a flat surface. So this is a flat surface, and that's what we're going to work with. I've already created a character and a game mode. And I was looking into this and sneezing. Well, I might sneeze at random throughout the course of this video. I'm sure that will be very entertaining to those of you that don't mind your ears getting blown out. Anyway, when you create a character, if you look up online, thanks, Unreal, super helpful. When you look up online how to do this, this is not the window that should have popped up. Oh, that's weird. When you look up online how to do this, how to create a character, they always go and create like a million game mode elements first. And it's like, why are you doing that? And that's because Unreal has a very strange... This is really weird. So this was working, and now all of a sudden it's not working. That's... Why is this a data-only blueprint? It wasn't 10 minutes ago. Well, it doesn't matter. There's nothing in it, so we'll go ahead and delete it. Force deleted. And then we'll create a new one. So there we are. So kapow. We'll just call it M character because we don't care what it's called. It's disposable. Pop that up. There we are. This is what I expected to see. I'm not sure why it decided the other one was no longer valid. What I did is I deleted all of these events, and that might have been the cause. Either way, the problem here is that if we want to do something like, oh, well, if we, try and move forward, the character moves forward, we've got to add an event that understands that it has to fire when the axis of forward is being pressed. Here's the problem. The inputs down here, they don't contain any sort of abstract ideas like forward axis. I can say specifically if the player hits W, move forward. So I could just go in here and select W, which would be down at the end here, like this. Boom, that would work. And then I could be like, okay, well, we have that. But that's the thing. We don't want that. We want it to be axis-based so that we don't have to do a whole bunch of stupid math, so that we can remap it easier. And for some reason, the default game mode for Unreal doesn't have access maps, and I don't know why that is. You would presume that by default, most games are going to want, in this engine at least, up, down, left, right, click, that sort of thing. Doesn't exist. In Unity it does. The default is actually like 40 entries long in Unity. But here in Unreal, it doesn't exist. There's no input access element. However, if we use this game mode here, we can come down, oh, not this game mode, sorry. If we go into Edit, Project Settings, and go down into Inputs, you can see here it's like it's not going to let us do anything. So we have to change it to a different game mode, I believe. This is the first time I've actually tried to do this. But we can create a mode where it allows us to actually put in access stuff. Why it's not there by default, I don't know. Seems like a strange thing to want to repeat every time you create a new game, so my presumption is that a lot of people use game modes that are just like inherited from a game that they inherited from a game that they inherited from a game, because otherwise they're doing the same 8 things over and over and over and over and over, which seems kind of pointless. The gameplay modes, there we are. So here's the modes window, and you can see how it's got this game mode base. We can switch this to whatever we want, and here's the one we created, M game mode. And we can switch this from default pawn to, is it default pawn that we want to switch, or player controller that we want to switch? I actually don't know. I guess it's default pawn because player controller doesn't exist yet, so we'll go ahead and choose that. And we're just kind of farting around, having a little bit of fun, destroying a project, because there's no way that this project's going to survive our experiments, and that's just fine by me. So now we've selected our 2 empty states as the default pawn and the default game mode, and in theory that will allow us to change the inputs. No, it isn't. Input settings. Oh, I guess here I just have to click it. Maybe I could have done that before. For some reason I thought I couldn't actually access the bindings before. I thought they were part of the game mode, and maybe they are. I have a feeling they're supposed to be. Well, if you wanted to know, you can rewind it and see whether these were there the first time I looked. Anyway, here we can set up some access mappings. And this is the dumb part, because these should be automatic. But the weird thing is that it's not something that is, how do you want to say it? Normally, this sort of thing needs to be more flexible than this. In Unity, we actually complain constantly that this is the same way they do it in Unity. And we complain constantly about it, because it means that if you're using, say, a German keyboard, you're screwed. You have to like manually maybe go in and remap things. And if you have like a controller and you also want to accept input from that, you have to like add in 18 different things and try and guess what kind of controller they're using. Oh, it's a mess. That's why in Unity there is a plugin everybody uses that just does all that shit for you. And I'm a little bit shocked to find out that Unreal has the same really ass backwards approach. This is like something from 2002, and I'm sort of wondering whether or not there is like a super popular Unreal plugin that does all this bullshit, because it's bullshit. Like 99.9% of the games that anybody is going to create in Unreal, the controls are going to be very, very similar. It's just how the character responds to the controls that are going to be different. So that's why it's a little bit strange. And people in the tutorials, people are like, oh, this is the player move forward _ backwards _ axis, and just call them vert and whores. I don't know why you'd have any complicated name for them. You could even, if you really wanted, you could go full complexity and go vertical and horizontal. I guess the reason is that you might think that this is a negative one, isn't it? Yeah. You might think that a horizontal and a vertical, you might think vertical is like flying off into the sky. That's probably why, now that I think about it, but I don't have to worry about that because it's my game. There we are. So now we've got these 2 bits, and we'll come back here and change the other things. Oh no, my voice is already going. This is the problem with working from home all the time. I literally do not talk for like 4 days straight. I won't have to do anything other than say like 2 sentences. And my voice was already fragile before all this happened. So apparently it has decided that since I no longer need it, it's going to go away. Anyway, here you can see we've got that respond when the W is pressed. Well, we have a couple of other options now. If we go down into input this time, we should see axis events and axis values. See this? This will allow us to control the motion using those axis values. And in theory, those axis values can be remapped or at least buffed up later. I don't have to go back into this blueprint and try and worry about whether or not these things are going to work. So if we do this get vertical, it's going to respond with a value between 1 and -1. Unfortunately for us, I believe it's going to respond with either a -1, a 0, or a 1. It doesn't appear at first glance like Unreal has any axis softening in its inputs. It doesn't seem like there is any sort of ability for me to say, you know, well, this axis shouldn't snap. So if I wanted to have that happen, I would have to do it here in the blueprint, maybe with like a get last, you know, save this for next frame and then lerp the 2. But let's go ahead and start with something simpler instead. And I say start with something simpler, but I actually can't remember a damn thing about this. Between the last time I used Unreal and now, I used at least 3 other node-based programming engines. I can't remember a thing about any of them. I know the way the nodes work, obviously, but for things like what the actual node names are and how to get this, that, and the other thing, I don't really remember. So we're gonna have to just kind of look through it and learn it together, and you can see how an experienced nerd will familiarize themselves with a new product. It's not all about looking at tutorials. Now, to be fair, I do look at tutorials, but I don't I don't just follow them. I figure out where the pieces I need are, and then I go and I familiarize myself with those pieces, because I'm going to need like a million things, and no tutorial is going to teach me every single one of those things. So it's better to know where you need to go, and then you can look through and see all your options and explore them and just have some fun with it, because that's the point. If you're not having fun, you're never going to make it as a programmer, because you're never going to want to program. So asset manager, I don't think we need to worry about assets. Lots of stuff here. Augmented reality. Ooh, automation. Oh, that's actually pretty cool. So automation is for testing purposes. I could add in like a thing that says, oh, if the vertical value goes above 1, spit out an error. Stuff like that. And we'll just go ahead and not use any of that right now. Oh, look at that. Awesome. So I can make it so that if there's something goes wrong, we can just automatically take a screenshot of it. Just kind of looking through. Ooh. Chaos must be the name of their physics solver. Yeah. It doesn't mean chaos as in like noise or randomness. It means capital C chaos as in the name of the utility set that does all the math for them. People with trendy names. I think that Unity has had a couple of similar things. Like they have a particle system that's named something trendy, like Shuriken, I think. Character. Well, assign movement mode change delegate. Ooh, that could be useful. Assign on character movement updated. For newer blueprint menu system, act simply as a UK2 node add delegate with attached custom event node. Ooh, that's let's put it in and see what it is. Ah, I see. I say, but what I don't actually see very much yet. Still learning here. So here we have bind event to onCharacter move updated. And this means that I think this event feeds into, because it's on the left, right? So that means that when this event fires, this event will get updated. And so what we're trying to do is bind the event to onCharacter move updated. So oh, well, there is an old velocity and an old location. That's actually super helpful for my mech game. I might have to actually go look it up. This is a little bit beyond what I just happen to know. Call function. Okay, so these are functions that I am creating. That's the function right there. So this is a function that gets called, but it's on the left. So I'm assuming that what's happening here is I am assigning this function to get called whenever the character movement changes. So this will happen as long as I trigger this. So if we were to assign this, for example, oh, we can't because it's not an event. If we were to create an event for that, just go down to input. We'll use this event. It's right here, right? So we'll just go ahead and press it there. Pam. I believe that we can just leave that as self, and I don't think we need to have any sort of additional exec. But what we do need is for this to do something, right? We want to have some kind of output for it. We just noticed that there is a testing automation thing, but let's see if there's just like a dedicated output section. No, there isn't. Is there a dedicated debug? There is. So if we look at the debug, visual logger, vislog text. So here's a vislog text. And we'll go ahead and say this event triggered. Triggered. That's not how you spell it. And we're just going to test and see whether when I hit W, well, that's not going to happen because we're not actually moving the character yet. Are we? But it might get updated even if we're not moving it. Let's find out. Basically, I just want to see what happens because that's the fun part. So we'll just move that down and away. And if we hit play here, the good news is it's definitely our new character model because it's completely broken. I don't see it giving us any sort of visual feedback on the debug side, which I'm presuming it would do. So my guess is that it's not counting as a character update because we haven't actually moved the character at all. So, you know, it's asleep, so it's not getting updated. We need to move the character. Let's go back to that. That's something there. You know, I wanted to test this out, but it's a little bit early in our sequence to actually test that out. So let's see if we can move our character at some point here first. Character. Bind event to movement mode change delegate. Bind event on character movement updated. Bind event. So these are two different sets. Assign on character movement updated as opposed to bind event on character movement. That's interesting. In theory, bind event will happen after the character move is updated, and assign on character movement will override the default behavior of the character movement. Ob says, "Rip Scuba Steve game." Yeah, I can't help it. It's gone. All that data is gone forever. So, oh well. So in theory, this will actually change how the character moves, whereas this will spit out something when the character... no, they're the same. Is one of them just preloaded with an event? That might be it. Yeah, so one of them is just preloaded with an event. That's fine. Kind of strange convention for naming, but it's not too bad. Anyway, here we have a whole bunch of actual things happening. Hooray. These are Booleans. These are requests. So jump, launch character, stop jumping, uncrouch, unbind. So these are like common character events, and none of them are motion related, which means that the event for moving the character is probably something a little bit different. Don't think we need any of these yet. No, it's still too early for that stuff. That's going to require some C++, I can already tell. We could put in a particle system, maybe. Engine subsystems. I don't think we need that yet. Event dispatchers, eye tracking, focus, foliage, force feedback, functional testing, game. That's pretty basic. Pretty global here. Create player. Get player crap. Oh, that's interesting. This could be super useful. In trying to make space games, which I'm not at the moment, but there's a lot of travel in space games, and one of the issues is that you've either got to switch everything over to using doubles, or you've got to constantly move the world back to 0, 0, 0, because otherwise you get float errors and the ships start to vibrate. If you've played any Space Engineers, you're very familiar with that, because anytime that you go out into the distance in Space Engineers, things start to shake. They also start to shake if you play multiplayer. It's a very shaky game. Basic options, that's pretty nice. Gameplay tags. Tasks. Background tasks, okay. There's my inputs. Got that already. Excuse me. Well, I burp into the mic. It seems funny to me that light estimation function library is not in lighting. I guess that's because it's a Magic Leap specific toolkit. LOD, Lumen, Magic. Why isn't it in Magic Leap then? Oh, whatever. Math. Bunch of basic shit. Sounds good. Miscellaneous. It seems shocking to me that they would have a miscellaneous tab. Mobile patching, motion controller, movie rendering, net, mark property dirty. Oh, nice, nice. That's going to be really useful. Networking, flush norm. Yeah, okay, so this is actually pretty nice. Niagara. That's their particle system, right? No, what is this? I think Niagara is their particle system, isn't it? Yeah, I think it is. Oculus. No one's ever going to use that again. Online. Don't think we need any of that. But that's nice to know there are some turn-based utilities. That's actually quite nice. Painting, pawn. Character movement. Ah, here it is. So we can add force, impulse, velocity, calculations, find the floors, get the character owner, get all of these various things. Most of them can probably be set as well. Yeah. So if we were to just simply add force, I think we want to use add force. So here you can see there is actually a thing called character movement. What is this? So my problem is I don't actually know what that is. So that is the target. It's in the target slot here. Meaning that it's It's an object. It's an object on the player character. It's an object called character movement. That's a little interesting. I don't really know what's up yet. I don't remember this for some reason. Anyway, here we've got this yellow input, and if you're wondering if that yellow input can take a value, my guess is it can, but only if it's converted. Convert a float into a vector. So what we're doing now is we're just... Okay, so basically what we need to do is get the vertical and the horizontal. Can we change this to a horizontal as well? Apparently we have to manually create it again. That's kind of stupid. If we bind these two together into a vector, I'm not sure what the word for that is. Is that like a vector math? Here's a vector 2D. Make vector 2D. There it is. Except for we've got these backwards, so we'll just flip them. Boom, boom. And boom. Well, this is supposed to be a 3D, isn't it? Yeah, so that's fine for now, I guess. We'll go ahead and turn this into a make vector 3D. Now, I don't remember... Oh, we don't need that anymore. I don't remember whether or not the vertical is Y or Z in Unreal. We will know soon. Anyway, let's go ahead and compile that and try it out. I'm not sure if this is even on. So here is the player start component, which isn't... Yeah, so the player start isn't a... isn't an actor of this sort. It's not a character. It's just a spawn location. And I believe the idea is that it will spawn whatever the default is, which should be this guy. But for some reason, I can't get that guy, this guy, to actually do anything. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and hook up a Vizlog text to the default begin play and see if we can get any sort of visual out of this. I don't see any debug. I might be misunderstanding where the debug goes, or I might not be actually seeing the character. I might be misunderstanding what's actually necessary for the character to count as a character. So, I guess the first thing we should do is try and get the debug to see whether or not the debug will work in the first place. So we'll take this chair, and we will blueprint it. New subclass, child actors are harvest components. Replace a selected actor with an instance of a new that inherits from the... Replace a selected actor with a new... That's fine. It doesn't really matter. So here is our chair. How exciting. We'll take this event graph and we will put in a debug. Oh. Oh, that's the... Debug. Test, test, test. There is an option to add it to the message log. I guess we'll click yes on that. Compile it. And it's really complaining about the lighting, and I'm kind of worried that that might be where our thing is going to happen, so we'll just rebuild the lighting for now. And will that black halo go away? No, okay. Alright, well, whatever works or doesn't work. Hit play, and I don't see anything. So we should be able to check the logs. Message log or output log. Oh, here it is. So it's saying test, test, test. It's just that it's not showing up on the screen. And for something called debug visual log, I would presume it was supposed to pop up on the screen. Like I was expecting it to pop up here or here. Well, there are some other options. Let's test some other options. So instead of the vislog test, let's go ahead and do some other debugs. I saw like a pin debug and a couple of others. Box shape, location, logs location as a sphere with a given radius, recording for visual. Okay, so the problem here is that visual logging is actually a library that has to be turned on. So that's not what we want. It has to be something else. So apparently the debug system is not terribly useful as is. Maybe I just don't understand. Oh, so there's actually debugging within other debugs. Wow. So the debug section doesn't contain all of the, or even the most common debugging elements. We're going to want to be able to use these rendering debugs if we want to draw it on the screen. Yeah, so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and draw a debug circle. Just drop that in here. Kapow. And the idea is we're going to want to draw it around ourself. So I'm not sure if this is only going to last one frame. We may want to do it on the event tick instead. Let's just go ahead and do that already. Oh, both. Great. That's perfect. So we'll give it a radius of 1. And right now it's a center at 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. We should be able to find our own position. Transform position. I think that might be what we want. Let's just take a look here. Set mouse position, get mouse position. Get orientation. Oh, that's head tracking. No, there's got to be something I'm missing here. There's something easier than this. It wouldn't be under physics, would it? I mean, everything has a position, regardless of whether or not there's a physics involved. We could go ahead and get the center of mass, I guess. But this isn't a physics object, so it's not going to have a center of mass. Physics volumes. I don't think I'm just missing it, but it's possible, I guess. Let's go ahead and get that position. Let's type in location this time. Ah! Object world location, spawn feedback, spawn emitter at location, inverse transform location, transform. Did I type position before and get something else? Interesting. You'd think that they would choose one or the other. Location and mobile. So maybe I should be typing in transform. Get the transform from which all absolute should be relative. That might be it. Okay, so this specifies an object, but it doesn't specify a position. I was hoping there'd be like 80 things below it with like a million different kinds of objects. You know, different kinds of outputs representing the various properties of the object. That's not the case. But we got a transform location right here. But this transforms a position by the supplied transform. Now, obviously, I could just provide it with 0, 0, 0. But what I want is I just want the position of the object in the game world. Let's just see whether I can look that up. Unreal position of object in game world. But we'll just say position of object. How do I get the location of an object? Use the get world location. Oh, there it is. It was just lost in this big transformation subset. That's why I couldn't find it. So we'll just grab that. Kapow. There we are. So I wanted to drag you. There we are. That should be a 3D value. We can just drop that right here. All right. So that was complicated, but that's all, I guess. Let's see whether or not that works. It's one of those things where once you understand that it's going to be pretty easy, but until then it's going to be a mess, miserable. I don't believe this is working, although it's a little bit hard to tell. So the reason I say it's a little bit hard to tell is because it might have been working, but the chair is just at the wrong situation, so we can't see it. Yeah, there it is. See it? That little teeny bop. I was right. So when you render this, it actually renders behind the mesh. It renders as a mesh object. So if you've got something between it and you are not going to be able to see it. And that's what happened in the first frame. I could see like 1 pixel of it, and I was like, that pixel looks suspicious. And I was right. It was suspicious. And if we take a look at the thing, you can see what's a little surprising here is that the radius of 1 is apparently 1 centimeter, which I didn't really expect. We'll go ahead and make it a meter. Oh yeah, that's not terribly circular, but it does the job. It doesn't look like a meter though. It looks like 2 meters. Oh, it's a radius. That's radius. That's fine. If we increase the number of segments, I'm just kind of goofing off to see what's going on over here. Yeah, that does work. Good. Okay, so we do know that this will function. So we'll just grab this and pop it over here and paste it in. Choop. Oh, sorry. And then we're going to just do that get world position again. World location. And then drop that in. Pow. And we'll compile that. And the only problem here is that we won't be able to see it because we're on top of it. See? So in order for us to do that, we actually want to put it somewhere where that we can see. So instead of putting it at the center where we are, we're going to be dropping it at a specific location. Let's just use this location. Transform, location, copy. I'll paste that in over here. Oh, I can't paste it in? Why can't I paste it in? Are you kidding? Okay, so I have to manually type it. That's not great. Okay, so there it is. See it? So that is us. We are definitely in the game world as M character here. We're also receiving some test logs. So right now we know that this is actually spawning into the world, but we can't seem to get it to move. And my assumption here is that's because I don't understand how it's supposed to move. So if we look here at the character again, we don't need this anymore. Just delete that for now. In this vislog text here, I think we just delete this. We'll come back to it later if we decide we need it. So it's possible that it works, but the force is so small that it's not worthwhile. So we'll go ahead and add in a multiply here. Vector times float. There it is. Can we hold down Alt and get it to pop in? Control, Alt, Shift. Oh, I can't get it to insert. There's usually a way to get these things to insert themselves into the line, but apparently I don't know it. And maybe there isn't. That would be a little strange, though. It's supposed to be a top-of-the-line utility. All right, so we are now having 50 times the add force bit, and it's not functioning. Now, that might be because we're never triggering the add force. So in order for us to actually trigger the add force, so see how this isn't being called? In order for us to trigger that, we're going to want to do this every tick. Now let's try it. No. Interesting. Okay. So let's remove this. How do you get rid of one of these? Just hit delete? No. Middle click, right click, nothing. Okay, so as far as I can tell, the only way to delete one of those lines is to put a node in the middle of it and then delete that node, which is kind of strange. So we're going to go ahead and just have it add a specific amount of force and see whether or not that works. There are some options here that as to what might be wrong. One is that the movement object might be invalid. Yeah, I don't see any sign of us moving at all. So it might be that this movement object doesn't actually exist and is kind of broken or something. I don't know if I'll be able to debug that without looking at a tutorial. And I don't really want to look at a tutorial, like a long tutorial on stream. I don't know. Let's go ahead and say Unreal Move Object. Oh, Blueprint. It's telling me how to do it in the editor window, which is not what I want. Okay, so I think this is the problem. I don't know why this is the problem. I don't know what it's supposed to do as opposed to what it is doing. But we want this to be self, at least for the moment. So we'll just delete that and see whether or not that works. Oh, no, I didn't like that. So the problem here is that I do not have a character movement component on this object. At least I don't think we do. So if we take a look at the viewport, oh, here over on the left, maybe? Here, we got the character movement. Here it is. So here's our character movement general settings. None of these seem wrong. They seem like the defaults, and they should work fine. So basically, we are telling the character movement, okay, so maybe what we're doing is wrong. So we're adding force. Is adding force not what we want to do? Maybe we want to add the input vector instead of the force. Let's try it. Deleted. Oh, are we going to have to do that every tick? Yeah, hold on. Just once again connect that up with the event tick function. Okay, so that's better. So the problem there was that I was attempting to add a force, and apparently the force behaves in a way I didn't expect. So we should be able to do this. Hit compile. Hit play. Ah, there we are. Look at that. I got the axes backwards because I'm fucking brilliant. But other than that, it's fine. Yep, they are all precisely backwards, but it works. So I can make them not backwards pretty easily. Just go into project settings, go down into inputs, and flip them. Much better. All right, so here you can see us moving around like this. But we can't turn our head or jump or anything. We just got the very most basics down. But that was really what I needed to get started here. The basic idea here is I wanted to make sure that I knew what blueprints were and how to use them, because there are a couple of surprise elements in here. It seems like this is going to be prone to spaghetti code, but I guess I can't say that for sure because I haven't done anything complicated with it yet. Either way, we could draw that debug circle. Pow. Let's just take a quick little gander, make sure that I understand that. Yeah, good. So that works as expected. And the basic idea here is when I am doing a mech stomping around, I'm going to want to add in an awful lot of delay elements, frame-to-frame delay elements. Not sure how to do that yet. You know, I might stop early. Or more accurately, I might open the other project. That's kind of interesting. I'm not sure not sure what's going on there. I should have probably given you Phoenix, right? Doesn't really matter. Well, that was nice and fast. So this is the project I'm actually working in at the moment. It's still pretty primitive. I spent a lot of time trying to get terrain materials to work, and I'll go ahead and describe that to you. If you know more about terrain materials than me, feel free to chime in and tell me what the heck's going on, because they have confused me. So basically, the idea is that the terrain in Unreal, the landscape, my bad, if we go into landscape editor here and then we switch over to paint, you can see these target layers here. You can't add these. This is not an interactive list. What happens is you have to create a material that has references to these layers. So once you create that proper material, these layers will automatically show up. And to show you that, if we go over here into the terrain materials section, here's our terrain setup, right? And I've got 4 layers referenced via this. So this is just a sample layer. You say, go out to the layer and find me the value at this location. And then I basically just lerp them all together. So here's mud, grass, sand, and rock. And I just lerp, 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 lerp. Very basic over. It looks complicated. It is really not. So here's the problem with this approach. There are a number of landscape options. For example, here is a landscape layer blend where you can specify an arbitrary number of layers and blend them together in an arbitrary way. The problem is that blending those layers together only takes one input at a time. So I have to have a different layer blend utility for albedo maps, normal maps, metalness maps, smoothness maps. They all have to be their own set. And every single one of those has to be dealt with individually and independently of the other ones. So I have to manually tweak each and every one of them. And if I ever change any of the values, I've got to manually change it on all of them. So what I did instead is I simply use these sampling systems, and then I come up with an output that is the amount of that layer. And then I just use that to lerp between everything. The problem is that, as far as I can tell, Unreal prides itself on having really shitty utilities, really shitty node editing utilities for their shaders. I don't know why they do this. For example, in any civilized shader editor, there is a register local variable and a get local variable node, so that I could, say, put a node right here that is grassness. And then whenever else I wanted to get that grassness, I could just put grassness in as a get, and that means there's not this giant long spaghetti node bullshit happening. But if you look up that online, you're like, how do I do that in Unreal? People say, well, it's exactly the same as having a long-ass line stretching all the way across the graph 80 times. And it's like, seriously? You're taking pride in the fact that you're forcing people to use spaghetti code? That's the first and most significant disappointment I've had with Unreal. Their materials system, their shader system, is just not as good as Amplify. Amplify is the paid Unity shader module thing. That's pretty sad, really. Unity isn't really better than Unreal when it comes to the final product, certainly not. But I can create very complicated shaders in Amplify, and they'll look nice and tidy, and I'll be able to keep track of what's going on. Whereas this shader is super simple. It's just 4 fucking layers. I'm just lerping between 4 fucking layers. And it looks like this because there's no way for me to lerp without dragging huge, long lines of bullshit across the screen. And that's really sad. Their attempt to fix that using the landscape blend tool here doesn't work because the height mapping that you use has to take inputs from 18 different places. So you still have all of this spaghetti line going everywhere. It's And I'm like, am I doing it wrong? What's going on? But as I look it up, there are no examples. There are no official examples of how to create landscape materials. The old official example of how to create landscape materials has been moved down into the legacy portion of the library. So if you try and download it, you have to go all the way to the bottom under legacy, and then it loads up and it's like, this is for the wrong version, and then you're like, whatever, and you look inside, and they don't even use these layer blend utilities. They use C++ functions. It's just a giant ball of C++ bullshit. I mean, it might not be C++, it might be shader code, whatever. The point here is that this is a real disappointment. And if anybody out there who happens to see this and watched the first hour for some reason and is now seeing this, if you happen to know how terrain tools actually are supposed to work in Unreal, let me know, because this is serious bullshit. I do not understand how this could possibly be the standard approach. But what I did in the end was I created these 4 layers by telling it what to sample, and by naming these samplers nodes, it creates those layers. And it's the same with the layer blends. You create the layers here in the shader, in the material, and then they just appear magically here. At which point there are a couple more steps, but at that point you can paint using them. Now, I believe the idea is that there's some kind of utility for creating these automatically via export from another program or something. I don't know. It's not very clear what's going on. But once you've got this set up, you can, in fact, have a pretty easy time painting whatever you want to paint. So we'll go back in here and tweak it however we want over the course of the game. But this is a very different approach than in Unity, because in Unity, you create the layers right on the right here on the Terrain tab. You just hit plus and you get a new layer. Now, the reason that Unreal doesn't allow you to do that is because they want to allow for very, very nuanced layer mixing. In Unity, the layer mixing is just flat linear. But in Unreal, they allow you to mix the layers based on like alpha masks and stuff like that. So you can get some really nice little organic changeover that's not just a that's not just a blend. It's not just from one to the other. And you can actually see that here if you know what you're looking for, because this is partly mud and partly sand. If I were to go over to grass and put the grass on the mud here, let's reduce that radius. A little too hard perhaps, but you can see how the grass, actually you might not be able to, but I can see how the grass only inhabits the top portion of the mud. The cracks of the mud are mud. And because of that, it feels a lot more natural to me than if we were just using a pure blend. The ability for us to have a blend that is kind of merging between the two, and I have to do it a little bit more polished than what I've currently got. The idea that I can get halfway between the two, it means that I can reduce the number of layers we use. If I can get, grassy mud by having a grass layer and a mud layer, then I have a lot more freedom to create whatever I want using only a few textures instead of having 50 or 60 textures. Now, Unreal does a whole bunch of very strange optimizations. They're strange to me. They're probably very useful. The landscape is cut up into little tiles, and the tiles have their own independent materials, which is kind of an interesting choice. So that means that if I have 4 layers, it's likely that any given tile will only have 2 layers. So if we were to go over into select here and select the various tiles, here, I'll just go over and I know that this is, brush size of 14, there's the problem, here we are. So this is the size of a tile, and we can see what sort of limitations we might have. So if we're looking at this tile, there's no stone in this tile, it's just grass and what looks like might be sand or something similar. And over here we got a similar situation, but over here on this tile we've got everything. So by having each tile compiled separately, they apparently do some optimizations where they just leave certain layers out. I'm not sure how useful that is, but it's really a kind of a fascinating example of how complex these things can get under the hood. So even though I'm creating a shader, I'm actually creating like 40 or 50 shaders, because every permutation that the game uses is compiled separately for optimization purposes. And that's a really fascinating choice, and I wonder if that's effective. Because everybody I see that talks about how to do terrain in Unreal is like, keep the number of layers as low as possible, like 4 layers at most. You don't want any more layers for performance reasons. And I'm like, well, is that true? Because if Unreal automatically nixes out any layer that's not part of the tile, then can't we just do like 9 or 10 layers and then have a little bit of care when we're painting to keep the, keep the number that are on any given tile to a minimum? But of course, nobody answers that question, and I don't even know who I would ask, because as far as I can tell, nobody uses these. I don't know. Does everybody just use like pre-made terrain materials that they get on a store or export from somewhere? Because there's not a lot of help coming down the line when it comes to this stuff. Tutorials are notorious. Tutorials are definitely lacking here. I found some folks who talk about it, but they talk about it from the perspective of like old hands. They don't really talk about how to get into it from the beginning. All the tutorials on how to actually do this stuff leave you with some extraordinarily crappy materials. I don't know, man. Not happy with it. So there are a lot of things that, I'm not going to go ahead and I'm not going to start, saying things like, oh, well, I miss Unity because Unity had this and that. Unreal is so far substantially better than Unity at everything. But there are a couple of Unity plugins that I use that are better than Unreal's defaults. And one of those things is the way that the materials work, the shaders. I use Amplify, and Amplify is leagues ahead of Unreal's node-based shader editor. It's actually usable. But in addition to that, I just don't know why they've set up their terrain in such a strange way. My assumption is that there's some sort of really high level, like AAA terrain features that can only be done if you set up your terrain like this. But I'm wondering if maybe I need to take a look at the asset store, the Unreal asset store, and find out whether or not there are like just some standards that everybody's using. And I've been working with, no plugins, and therefore it's like everybody's like, you should just get this plugin, but nobody says that. I did look up some tutorials on how to create characters, 3D models like this, and have them run around. And their suggestion there is just to go download all that shit. So clearly there is a heavy reliance on plugins and assets from the asset store. Maybe that's what I'll do. I'll get offline in a minute here and look through the asset store, and maybe it'll pop out at me. Maybe it'll be like, oh, well, obviously, the marketplace contains everything you need, and here's the free terrain material that's better than you'll ever need to create on your own or whatever. Not sure, but I do know for a fact that 99% of indie devs are not going to want to create their own terrain material like this. This is a nightmare in comparison to how easy it is to do everything else. That's my rant, and my voice is gone. It's only been an hour, but that's more than my voice can currently handle, so I'm going to have to sign off. I'll try and do some talking over the course of the next week to keep my voice lubricated or whatever. And so I'll see you on Saturday. I'm going to do some more offline work to try and get a little further here. Have a good one.